What an astonishing thing a book is.
Books, you're so fucking awesome. Do you remember the first book you ever read? Not a kid's book, but the first real one. The way it excited your imagination, fired off your mind. Really got you excited, influenced you, and who you'd become. In many ways, it's much the same for the human race itself. Our unremembered infancy giving way to substance as we learned to write. Just think of what a book can do. The Bible, the Bhagavad Gita. What is a society without a story anyway? Not much of a society at all. And what of the very first books, the very first stories ever told? Well, the books came much later than the stories, and almost every story ever told before is now lost. Try to feel that same excitement you had as you got into your first book. Now think of a kid 10,000 years ago. What stories did they have back then? What stories did they tell? My name's Pete Kelly. I'm a writer and a filmmaker. In my documentaries, I've looked at all sorts of these ancient ideas. But, overwhelmingly, I'm coming to realise that none of it, none of the videos, none of this, me speaking to you through this strange thing in front of you, would have been possible without books. And like my dear friend Carl Sagan here, who of course I never met, he passed away when I was 6. Usually, I'd be out in the world in search of these stories, those fundamental parts of our world history, and of course, bringing you along for the ride. At the moment though, it's early 2021. If you're still part of our modern society as you watch this, and not a passerby piecing together the scraps of our ruined civilization, you'll know what that means. Over the last year, books have been a great solace for me. Therapist, tour guide and time machine all rolled into one. And I suspect, if you've made it this far into the video, for you too. So, for now, until I can go out and explore the world again, I thought I'd share some of the books with you that define my story. Some of the ones that I've been reading recently, and generally that I've enjoyed over the years. This is the first episode, a random thought I had on a Monday afternoon and put together on a Wednesday. Who knows where it will lead? My name's Pete Kelly, and I bid you welcome to my book club.
Hello folks. Well, let's get started then. So I've been reading a lot of books over lockdown. I've not been able to travel anywhere, but I've been able to travel in my mind. So first up we have The Buried Book by David Damrosch. So it's really well written. It's one of those great popular history books. I think he's a journalist or something, but really did his research, knows his stuff, intertwines a story over thousands of years. You got the 19th century archaeologists and antiquarians who first discovered the ruins of ancient Mesopotamian civilization, interwoven with the Mesopotamians themselves. And then it's all about the Epic of Gilgamesh and the discovery of the flood fragment, all about the deluge, which people in the ancient world were convinced was this massive catastrophe that beset their ancestors, and then they were all living after this flood destroyed the first world. So yeah, very book, highly recommended for anyone interested in archaeology. Also, I've read Heart of Darkness recently by Joseph Conrad. Similar sort of time period that a lot of the stuff going on in the Buried Book was happening. Very interesting, Victorians exploring all over the world, and as the name suggests, it's quite a dark book, but it's well worth a read, one of those classics, classic for sure. And then of course we have a favourite of mine. This is The Lost Treasures of Troy by Caroline Moorhead. Again, brilliantly written book, telling one of the great stories of archaeology, that Heinrich Schliemann discovery of the city of Troy at the mound of Hisarlik in Turkey. I had the pleasure of visiting a couple of years ago, and it's an incredible place. And then this book, it really tells the whole story, right up until today. Well worth a read, that one, well worth a read. But it's not just history books that I've been reading science fiction too, my other great love. So this is Alistair Reynolds. I recently got into the Netflix TV show Love, Death and Robots, where I basically stumbled upon this guy's work. Zima Blue is one of the great episodes of that TV show. The short story is also brilliant. Beyond the Aquila Rift is the other one. Absolutely brilliant, it's in there. You get a lot more out of this book than the TV show. The TV show's great, but more backstory and more atmosphere in this, because obviously they have like 10-minute episodes and they try and fit everything in. But a bit more time, you know, in something like this for the story to play out. Highly recommend that one. It's a collection of short stories. It's great. And here we have George R.R. Martin. So partly because of Love, Death and Robots, I also got into just reading science fiction again. Obviously this is Game of Thrones guy, but well before he made Game of Thrones, he started off as a sci-fi writer. Incredible stories in here. He has this universe called the Thousand Worlds. It's a future history of mankind over the next several thousand years. You've got epic space battles going on, and just awesome characters really going on these amazing adventures. Highly recommend George Martin's stuff. And in line with that, this is one of my favourite books that I've ever read. I reread it recently, Downward to the Earth by Robert Silverberg. It's a masterpiece, real masterpiece. It's about what happens when two civilizations with entirely different outlooks on spirituality meet. You have the humans who go to this world, which they're living in the Stone Age, the people on this planet, but they're actually so much more advanced than we are spiritually. So it's all about that. It's about the meaning of life, really. Really good, riveting stuff. And talking about the meaning of life, we have The Way of the Human Being by this great, who is he? He's Calvin Luther Martin. I think he's a philosopher of history. So he really knows his stuff. And it's all about Native Americans and kind of the outlook that humans had for 99.9% of our existence when we were hunter-gatherers, living in small communities, small tribal entities. He talks about the creation of time as we know it as well at the start of this book, and it's really fascinating. It's a bit of a hard read. I actually bought this 12 years ago or so when I was studying at university and tried to read it but didn't really get it. But now I've revisited, and it sinks in more now. Yeah, worth a read, that one. So recently I discovered that maybe social media isn't great. And building upon this is Cal Newport's Digital Minimalism. This book's been everywhere recently. We've got Brian Fantana there. But yeah, basically this is a really, really, really good book. It's sort of a summary of everything that really we've been learning about in the last, 5-6 years about social media and just the internet and how everybody gets stuck into these, bubbles that sort of re-cement all their own views on things. As opposed to having that normal sort of conflict within society, the dialogue that that pushes forward ideas. People just get stuck in their little echo chambers. And it's all about that, and it's all about how you can try and escape from all that. Choosing a focused life in a noisy world is the subtitle. Yeah, digital minimalism, highly recommended. Great stuff. Right, I'm just going to have a break to see if everything's actually working, because I have no idea really if it is. Well, I messed about with the camera and somehow it's really dark now, but I think we're still filming, so, you know, I'm still learning all this stuff. But speaking of learning, this was a really good book. Russell Brand made a video about this book, so I checked it out. Are we still rolling? Are we still rolling? Yeah, we are. Yeah, really good. If anybody finds themselves in a creative rut of any sort, or just a rut in their career in general, this is a really good book for sort of refinding your love for the things you're passionate about. And it talks about a few different strategies of doing that. It's big on free writing, which I'm a big fan of, to get your thoughts out on paper about things. It's quite therapeutic, self-therapy almost. And it also talks about my favourite thing in the world to ever do, which is going to new places and sparking off new connections in your mind by going to these new places. Only good things follow. And it just outlines all of that. Really good. Really quite, it's a self-help book. It's a self-help book. But it's great. It's not wishy-washy or anything like that. Well worth a read. Another incredible archaeology book that I've been reading. This is about the incredible discoveries at Çatalhöyük in Turkey, the ancient Neolithic town that was discovered there, one of the oldest in the world. And it's all about the controversies that came with that discovery. So James Mellart is this fascinating archaeologist in the 1950s and 60s. It was his discovery, really. He found the place, but then all sorts of things follow. Police get involved, crazy things happen. It's a real life Indiana Jones story. And incredible insights into one of the oldest towns in the world and how it worked, how it operated. It's fascinating stuff. Most of the world were hunter-gatherers when this town was flourishing. Unbelievably old stuff, unbelievably old. Give it a read. So it's not just history that I've been reading. I checked out this book. In fact, this is the second, which I've just started, in a trilogy, the Regeneration trilogy, about the First World War. And it's about a load of dudes, basically. It's about a load of dudes who are in a hospital in the First World War, and it's interwoven with poets and great literary figures who are in this hospital. Really good insight into war and what it does to people. And also the sort of evolution of shell shock, the concept of shell shock into post-traumatic stress disorder that we know today, and how people were treated and how society treated those who come back from war. So yeah, give it a read. I just recently started this book, River of Doubt, about Teddy Roosevelt's expedition into the Amazon, which is incredible. It's incredible stuff. I've been researching the Amazon for a few years now, probably 3 or 4 years. Eventually, I'll make some sort of monstrosity 3.5-hour documentary on the place about all the ancient civilizations there and the expeditions to try and find out about this mysterious place. Because people have lived there for 10,000 years, longer. Some of the oldest pottery in the Americas has been found in the Amazon. And recently, giant cities lost underneath the jungle. It's just incredible. But yeah, Teddy Roosevelt nearly died on this expedition. Fascinating stuff. What a ledge. Been reading a lot about mythology recently. This is a book about Maori mythology. Incredible stuff. Really interesting parallels between all the different mythologies of the world, really. But the Maori, having been to New Zealand recently, incredible. I absolutely love it. And I'm working on a video about New Zealand again at the moment. And that'll be out fairly soon, I think, hopefully. Right, mythology, Irish mythology, incredible stuff. This is the book, The Táin, the legend of the hero Cuchulainn, and the great cattle raid of Cooley. It's been called Ireland's Iliad, and it really is a great read. It's very, very poetic and exciting. It's one of those books, a bit like Beowulf, supposed to have been read aloud, by a storyteller. So yeah, get this, have a little session in your house, around the fire, turn the TV off, read this. Immense. Another one, we have the Finnish Epic, the Kalevala. Huge inspiration to Tolkien when he was making Lord of the Rings and his Middle-earth. Obviously, the biggest inspiration would have been the Old English and Anglo-Saxon and the Welsh and the British people, but also the Kalevala made it in as well. Incredible Scandinavian epic, really, and it's one of the reasons why Finland is a country today. Very interesting stuff. George Orwell, one of my favourite authors, obviously 1984, Animal Farm, incredible books, but he also had a career as a journalist and as a non-fiction writer, and some of those works are some of my favourites that he ever wrote. Down and Out in Paris, he's slumming it, he's living a bohemian lifestyle. It's just awesome, it's just really interesting. It's a great insight into that lost generation between the 20s and the 30s, the interwar period, where it was almost like a proto-Beat generation before its time, really, and then tragically cut short as most of them were killed or irreparably damaged in the war, such as Orwell was. He died not long after. Right, back to archaeology. Got Shadowland. I don't know if you can see that. There we go, yeah. This about Wales during the Bronze Age and the Neolithic. It's just epic. That's Brinkethly D, I think, on the front. Really well written. And it's quite rare to find like a hard archaeology book that is a joy to read, and this is one actually. Just yeah, love a book like that. So, expeditions. I've got many planned. Next year and the year after, they're going to be big. These are the ones that would have been happening in 2020 and this year, but they will happen. And so I've been planning the trip of a lifetime. It's Turkey, guys. It's always Turkey. It's always been Turkey. Çatalhöyük, Göbekli Tepe, Gordian, Hattusa. Oh, the list goes on. The Anatolian Archaeological Museum at Ankara, Konya, Caesarea, the lost city of Ani. It's just incredible stuff. And that's going to be happening. Been planning these. I love these Lonely Planet books. I've got loads of them. It's just great, even if some of the places that are in it sort of close down and, possibly due to the pandemic, that might happen. It still gives you, all the archaeological information is never going to be out of date. These places have been there for thousands and thousands of years. They ain't going anywhere. And they're all in this book, and it tells you how to get there and what's feasible and what's actually doable when you're there. So yeah, Turkey. One of my favourite places on the planet. Obviously, I've been doing a lot of travelling around Britain recently due to, I wonder why. But this book, The Old Stones, is incredible. Absolutely incredible. It's got all of the stone circles, all the big ones ranked. And not just stone circles, it's chamber tombs, barrows, cursus monuments, all sorts of stuff, all the biggest things, henges, all the biggest ones and the best to look at that you can go visit. And these places these places don't close. They're all over the place, all over the country, and they're incredibly atmospheric, and I can't recommend going and seeing some of them enough and checking out this book. Right, so speaking of that lost generation, The Durrells was a show that me and my fiance got really into over lockdown. Absolutely loved it. Fascinating insight into the 1930s, which a lot of people obviously compare to now, which is a bit ominous. But yeah, The Durrells of Corfu, brilliant. Michael Haag is a great popular historian. He's written a book about the Knights Templar as well, which is really decent. And yeah, this is just a fantastic story. It's this family of expats who lived in Corfu in the 1930s, and they were from colonial India. The father died, and it's about the mother moving to Corfu with her kids, and just about what happens, all the adventures that ensue, and it's just fascinating. It's just really cool. Check it out. And speaking of going, travelling and all this stuff, I recently got into this book, Be Here Now, by Ramdas, aka Richard Alpert. Absolute nutcase. He was a Harvard professor who went from renowned psychologist to wearing a loincloth and travelling around India with nothing on him but a vial of LSD. An absolute nutcase. But it's a fascinating insight into what he learned through his psychedelic travels and his geographical travels to speak to all the mystics and the spiritual leaders of India. Yeah. Crazy book. 1960s, what a time. What else have we got? We've got another Maori mythology book there, Maori legends, fascinating stuff. Oh, John Cleese, one of my favourite people, on creativity. Incredible. Really, 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 really good book, actually. Incredibly well written, very short to the point. Look, giant words. I read it in one sitting, and it's just a really good insight into how he has been so productive throughout his entire life and how you can be too. Basically, you alternate between the two brains. You've got the sort of more analytical side, which is like for me anyway, it's like rewriting and things like that. And then there's just the mad, untethered free writing side. And you alternate between the two. When you get bored, you go to the other one. And it's all outlined in here, the two brains. One of the best books I've ever read. One of the most important books I've ever read for myself. Deep work. It's allowed me to be way more productive. Highly recommend this. Cal Newport, Ledge. Zealot, Life of Jesus. Bloody fascinating. Really, really good. Highly recommend this. We've got Louis there poking over the top. Yeah, give it a read. Obviously, I made a video about Masada fairly recently, and I had to just shoehorn Jesus in basically because it's an incredible historical period. A bit more Orwell, Road to Wigan Pier, another great one about his adventures looking into the working class of northern England and just the brutal time period that a lot of people lived in the early 20th century. It's good, really good actually, one of his best works. Oh, One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich. It's brutal. Solzhenitsyn. Ooh, it's about the Gulag. It's the 19. What is it? It's after the Second World War. Tens of thousands of heroes of the Soviet Union, really, who'd fought for them in the war, were then sent on trumped-up charges to Siberia. Some of them never came home. The ones who did come home eventually, absolutely brutalised, and they lived in horrible conditions, working themselves to death, basically. But yeah, this book, incredible stuff about what humans can put up with, basically, and it's about the human condition. All right, so we have this book about the Catacombs of Paris, another place I visited fairly recently, which I'm working on a video on at the moment. Crazy time after the French Revolution. One of the first times anyway, that a European monarchy had been overthrown, completely replaced by just self-made people, essentially. And obviously, as with any revolution, it's only a few years before it all goes wildly corrupt. Reign of terror, anyone and their dog being guillotined. Brutal times. But Paris had this giant reimagining of what it was and what a city could be, which obviously included digging up all of the dead of the entire city and putting them underground in this giant sort of monument to those lost souls. But yeah, this book, really interesting. I've been reading a lot about witchcraft recently. Recently went to the Witchcraft and Magic Museum in Bodmin in Cornwall. Incredible place. Absolutely fascinating collection from all over the world and all through history. But particularly, it was started by a guy practicing wizard, as you are, in the 20th century. He was recruited by Churchill to fight against Nazi occultists in the Second World War, as you do, standard. But yeah, these are fascinating. This one, it's massive. It's absolutely huge. It's definitive. Talks about all through the ages how magic has been viewed and what it was in society. I'm eventually going to make a history of magic. We also got more Maori legends and myths. This one is a dude an ethnographer, I think, who went round recording a lot of the myths and legends in the late 19th century while they were sort of dying out. So yeah, really interesting, that one. More Maori mythology. More New Zealand stuff, the Moa. I'm loving the Victorian era recently, if I'm honest. I think it's such a fascinating time where very little was still known about the world, all outside of Europe. Africa was still, huge swathes of it were unexplored. The Amazon obviously was unexplored. And then when people got to New Zealand, these incredible discoveries were made about what the place had been like before the Maori had got there. These giant birds that lived on the landscape. It's just incredible. Anything was possible during that time. People had wacky, mad theories. Everyone still believed in not everyone, but lots of people still believed in the occult. It's just fascinating. Loving a bit of Tolkien recently. I've been getting into his essays and his non-fiction writing. Obviously, we all know Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, Silmarillion, but he wrote quite a lot of other things as well. He was an academic. So this is about Beowulf and Grendel and all that stuff. Finnsburg fragment, I think he talks about a bit. And generally, yeah, it's good. I think, I'm not sure if it's in this one, but yeah, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. There's one of the great bits of this. He actually was a great analyst of these sort of like old storytelling traditions in England. And Sir Gawain and the Green Knight is one of those great stories. It's good. Check it out. Speaking of storytelling, we have Stephen King on writing, an incredible, incredible book for writers. And anyone wanting to tell a story. It's one of the best that I've ever read. And he's kind of revolutionised the way that I approach my storytelling as well. Stephen King, Ledge. Well worth a read, that one. Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. This is kind of a flip side to Solzhenitsyn, because this is obviously Holocaust. It's heavy, really heavy, but well worth a read. It's a testament to what people can experience and get through, basically. The things that this guy experienced, unfathomable. But yeah, check it out. Incredible. And really shows why we should still learn about the Holocaust and why we can't forget about all that stuff. And then to end off this inaugural episode of Book Club, What Makes Civilization? Really incredible, this, because you know you've got your standard analysis. You get your standard analyses of the ancient Near East, Sumeria, Egypt, Indus Valley civilization. You know, the big ones. But this goes beyond that, far beyond that. The metropolis of Ebla in ancient Syria, the Jiroft civilization of Iran. It talks about all these places that existed, not on the fringes, really. They were completely integral to how this huge ancient early Bronze Age system worked. These trade links all across the known world, how they were linked up with each other. This is great, really great. And it's great because it doesn't focus on it's not the big man theory of history. It's not individuals. This is about cultures as a whole and how they shift and change, and just generally spins a great story without having to focus on individual kings and rulers. All right then, guys. So that's it for me. Yeah, let me know if you've enjoyed this video. Obviously, this is the first time I've made a video like this, so I still don't really know what I'm doing, but hopefully it comes out okay. I'm in my studio here, which I've been in for about a year now. Got it nice in the way that I like it now. Got some helmets here. Let me know if you want to see a tour of the place. But yeah, until then, I'll be working on new History Time videos, new History of the Earth, new Pete Kelly travel documentaries. Yeah, I'll see you next time. Cheers.